For 8 whole years, Brad Pitt didn't say anything. He stayed completely quiet. He didn't defend himself or explain what happened when his family fell apart. While newspapers and websites wrote stories about him, some good, some bad, he just stayed silent and let people think whatever they wanted. But in 2025, after years of court cases, broken family relationships, and a huge fight over a fancy French property worth $500 million called Chateau Miraval, Brad Pitt finally decided to talk. And what he said wasn't angry or mean. Instead, he told the quiet truth about a man who had been living through the most painful time of his whole life. When Brad Pitt first met Angelina Jolie in 2003 while making a movie called Mr. and Mrs. Smith, nobody could have guessed what would happen next. Back then, Brad was married to Jennifer Aniston, and Angelina had just divorced Billy Bob Thornton. When people saw Brad and Angelina acting together in the movie, they noticed they seemed to really like each other. The magazines and TV shows started talking about them non-stop, watching every little thing they did together. By 2005, Brad and Jennifer got divorced. The whole world had already decided what they thought happened. When photographers took pictures of Brad with Angelina and her son Maddox in Kenya, Africa, the story became even bigger than anyone could control. Over the next 10 years, Brad and Angelina created a family that everyone in the world watched and talked about. They adopted Maddox from Cambodia, a girl named Zahara from Ethiopia, and a boy named Pax from Vietnam. Then they had 3 kids of their own. Shiloh was born in 2006, and twins named Knox and Vivienne were born in 2008. Their home became a symbol of people from different places living together as one family. The media called them Hollywood's perfect example of a global family. But what everyone saw from the outside wasn't what was really happening inside their home. Things were actually getting harder and harder. Taking care of 6 children while being super famous, traveling between different countries all the time, and having cameras follow them everywhere started to cause big problems. The cracks in their relationship started appearing long before anyone outside the family could see them. By 2008, Brad and Angelina bought Chateau Miraval for $28 million. It was a beautiful, peaceful estate in France that became a safe place for their family and where they started making really popular wine called Miraval. They lived there for 6 years, raising their kids and taking care of the vineyard where grapes grow. In 2014, they had a small, quiet wedding there with just their close friends and their children. For a short moment, it seemed like everything was finally calm and stable in their busy, crazy world. But just 2 years later, everything came crashing down. Angelina filed for divorce in September 2016, saying they couldn't work things out anymore. What had once been a united, happy family quickly became the center of one of the most painful and sad breakups Hollywood had ever seen. The moment everything broke happened just a few days before Angelina filed for divorce. On a private airplane flying from France to the United States in September 2016, something happened that would cause a huge media explosion and change how the world saw Brad Pitt as a father. According to papers that Angelina's lawyers gave to the court later, Brad had been drinking alcohol on the plane, and an argument between them got really bad. Their oldest son, Maddox, who was 15 years old at the time, tried to step in and stop the fight. What exactly happened next is something people disagree about, but Angelina said that Brad grabbed Maddox by the neck during the argument. People who knew Brad's side of the story strongly said this specific part wasn't true. But just the fact that someone accused him of this was enough to get the FBI involved. Because the incident happened on a plane flying over the ocean, which means it was in international space, the FBI started investigating right away. At the same time, an organization in Los Angeles called the Department of Child and Family Services started their own investigation to make sure the children were safe. For several weeks, Brad's life became filled with interviews, tests, and visits with his kids where someone had to watch them together. Both the FBI and the other agency eventually decided there wasn't enough proof to charge Brad with a crime. Angelina didn't try to push the case any further either, but by the time the investigations ended, the damage was already done. Brad's reputation, what people thought about him, had been destroyed in the news and on the internet. And the trust inside the family had been broken in a way that couldn't be fixed. In the months after the plane incident, a temporary court order gave Angelina main custody of all 6 children. This meant the kids would live with her most of the time. Brad was allowed to visit them, but someone always had to be there watching. This decision was made to protect the children, but it also started an 8-year-long custody battle, a court fight about who gets to take care of the kids that would hurt everyone in the family emotionally. What had once been a family living together was now broken into pieces, with people everywhere talking about them and saying harsh, mean things every single day. Even though the investigation said Brad didn't do anything criminal, Brad stopped talking publicly and stayed quiet for years. He later admitted that he stopped drinking alcohol completely in 2016 because he realized his behavior on that plane flight had been a turning point, not just with the law, but with his own emotions and life. The family that used to stand together at fancy movie events was now divided by anger, distance, and pain that nobody talked about out loud. As the custody battle went from months to years, the deepest pain didn't come from courtrooms or newspaper headlines. It came from Brad's growing distance from the 6 children he used to carry in his arms at movie premieres. Maddox, the oldest child, was the first one to pull away from Brad. By 2021, he had to give testimony in court, which means he had to tell the judge what he thought, and what he said was described as not favorable to Brad. Reports said that he privately told people he didn't think of Brad as his father anymore. Even though Angelina never said this publicly, leaked documents, secret papers that got out, suggested that Maddox had tried to legally change his name to just Maddox Jolie, removing Pitt. This was like symbolically cutting the bond that had been so important during Brad's early years as a father. Pax, who is also an adult now, reacted even more strongly and angrily. In 2020, he wrote a message on his private Instagram account calling Brad an awful person and claiming that the kids would shake with fear whenever Brad came near them. Even though the post was deleted really quickly, the words spread all over the internet and showed everyone that there were emotional wounds that had been there for years. By 2023 and 2024, Pax had 2 traffic accidents that reportedly led to him having emotional problems, which meant people at home had to watch him closely. People who knew what was going on noticed that the weight of all the family fighting had really hurt him in ways the public couldn't see. Then came Shiloh, the child who was once seen as the living symbol of Brad and Angelina's love for each other. In May 2024, she filed legal papers to remove Pitt from her name and just be called Shiloh Jolie. The court approved this change in August of that year. Her lawyer said the change came after a series of personal events, and news sources around the world described it as the clearest sign of which parent she felt loyal to. By 2024, Vivienne was being credited as Vivienne Jolie when she worked with her mother on a Broadway play called The Outsiders. Knox, who is still a minor, meaning he's still a kid under 18, stayed away from public attention, but even he hadn't been seen in public with Brad for years. Through all of this, Brad stayed silent and never once addressed the accusations from his children. According to people close to his legal team, he asked many times for family therapy sessions, where a professional would help them talk through their problems. Some of these sessions did happen under a therapist's supervision, but none of them lasted very long. The emotional distance had grown too big, and the once close family had become like stars in the sky, each moving further and further apart, each person carrying their own version of what really happened. If the emotional battles tore the family apart, the financial war, the fight over money and property, turned their separation into one of the most complicated legal fights Hollywood had ever seen. Chateau Miraval, the quiet French estate where they got married in 2014, became the center of years and years of court cases. After Angelina filed for divorce in 2016, Brad initially owned 60% of the property through his company called Mondo Bongo, while Angelina owned 40%. Later, he transferred 10% to her so they could share it equally 50-50 as husband and wife. For a while, Muravel represented their unity, their togetherness. But after the marriage fell apart, it became a battlefield. In 2021, Angelina sold her entire half of the property to a company called Tenuta del Mondo, which is owned by a Russian billionaire named Yuri Shefler, without telling Brad first. Brad had been against working with Stoli Group for a long time, and according to a lawsuit he filed in early 2022, they had a verbal agreement, a spoken promise, that both of them had to give written permission before either one could sell their shares. Brad's team described Angelina's sale as deliberately hostile, which means she did it on purpose to hurt him. They accused her of trying to damage Muravel's business operations and Brad's ability to run the company. Angelina immediately fought back with her own argument. She said Brad had refused to buy her part unless she signed a huge NDA, which stands for Non-Disclosure Agreement, a legal document that stops you from talking about something. She said this NDA was designed to silence her about the events that led to their divorce. By late 2023, the fight got even worse. Newly filed communications, legal papers they sent back and forth, showed Angelina's lawyers arguing that Brad was responsible for all the difficult document work because he was suing her for $35 million in damages. This means he was saying she hurt Muravel's business and wanted her to pay him that much money. Brad's team insisted that Angelina was holding back important documents by claiming attorney-client privilege, which is a legal rule that says you don't have to share certain private conversations with your lawyer. They claimed she was abusing this rule to hide critical evidence, important proof. Angelina responded in her own court filings that she had left Brad in control and given him full rights to live in their family homes in Los Angeles and at Muravel after they split up. She said she did this hoping it would calm things down during a really traumatic, painful period. But instead, she faced years of increasing legal pressure. By 2024, the winery dispute had turned into a complicated international court case involving corporate law from Luxembourg, a country in Europe, accusations of malice, which means doing something mean on purpose, and requests for over 22 contested documents, which means papers both sides were fighting about. As a December 17th court hearing got closer, both sides accused each other of bad faith, of not being honest or fair. What had once been a peaceful sanctuary for their family now stood as a monument to everything that went wrong. $500 million in property was locked inside a war that neither of them seemed willing to end. In May 2025, Brad Pitt did something he had avoided for almost 10 years. He finally spoke publicly. On May 28th, he appeared on the cover of GQ magazine, giving his first long, detailed interview since Angelina filed for divorce back in 2016. For years, the only time people saw him publicly was in silent paparazzi photos, pictures taken by photographers who follow famous people, and carefully written statements from his lawyers. But in this interview, Brad talked about the end of his marriage, the legal wars, and the distance between him and his children. His tone was calm, almost like he had no feelings left, like he was emotionally exhausted. He confirmed that the divorce was legally finalized in December 2024, calling it simply something that needed to be done. When the interviewer asked why he kept quiet for so long, he answered honestly, "I didn't see the point of speaking up when everything was chaos. Silence was the only way to avoid making things worse." For the first time ever, he publicly talked about the growing distance from his children. He didn't name them individually, he didn't blame anyone, and he didn't defend himself against their harsh, hurtful words. Instead, he said quietly, "I'm always here if they need their father." It wasn't a plea or an apology. It was more like a resignation, accepting a reality he couldn't change anymore. "No one gets married thinking their kids will turn their backs on them," he added. That sentence stayed in the interview like a wound that was still bleeding and hadn't healed. He avoided talking about the plane incident. He avoided saying mean things about anyone. He avoided accusing Angelina of anything. Instead, he just said, "What happened, happened." Brad also revealed that he had been completely sober, meaning he hadn't drunk any alcohol since 2016. He described his life now as focused on meditation, reading, quiet work, and sculpting, making art from clay or stone. He spoke like a man who had stepped back from the world, not like someone who had been defeated, but like someone who was emotionally drained and exhausted. A source close to Angelina told People magazine that she felt relieved. Brad had finally acknowledged that the divorce was over, and she had no interest in responding or saying anything back. The public's reaction was divided. People had different opinions. Some people admired his restraint. They respected that he stayed calm and didn't attack anyone. Others said he still avoided taking accountability, admitting his mistakes and taking responsibility. But for Brad, the interview seemed less like a comeback and more like a closing chapter. It was a final attempt to reclaim his own voice in a story that had been told without him for too long. After years of fighting, public attention, and courtroom battles, Brad Pitt now lives a life that looks nothing like the one he had when his family was still together. Professionally, when it comes to his work, he's still a powerful figure in Hollywood. His production company, Plan B, continues to be one of the industry's strongest creative forces. It's responsible for Oscar-winning films like 12 Years a Slave, Moonlight, The Big Short, and Women Talking. In late 2025, Brad is expected to return to acting on screen with a high-profile Formula One racing movie produced by Apple Studios. It's his first major leading role in years. The project, created in collaboration with famous race car driver Lewis Hamilton, has been described by people in the movie industry as Brad's most ambitious attempt to reinvent himself, to show a new version of who he is since his film Ad Astra. But outside the studio gates, his life is noticeably quieter. Brad now spends most of his time at his estate in Santa Barbara, where he sculpts, gardens, reads books, and keeps to himself. He has chosen privacy over fame and solitude, being alone, over social headlines and attention. In 2025, reports came out that Brad is engaged to a Swiss jewelry designer named Inez de Ramon. They were first seen together in 2022, and by early 2025, multiple sources confirmed he had proposed to her. A private European ceremony is planned for the end of the year. Even though Brad hasn't spoken publicly about the engagement, people close to him say this is the first time since the divorce that he has allowed someone into his life emotionally. Meanwhile, Angelina Jolie continues to work around the world as a filmmaker, producer, and humanitarian, someone who works to help people. Her daughter Vivienne is now working with her on the Broadway production The Outsiders, marking a new professional chapter for them as mother and daughter. Angelina has said that neither she nor the children have returned to Muravel since the painful events surrounding the divorce, and she stays focused completely on their stability and well-being, making sure they're okay. Maddox lives in South Korea. Pak stays out of the public eye. Shiloh and Vivienne have dropped the Pitt surname, the family last name. To Brad, these realities hang like a quiet ache, like constant sadness. They're reminders of what remains broken despite the legal closure, even though the divorce is legally finished. After 8 years of silence, he spoke. But the distance between him and the children he once held so closely remains the one truth he cannot rewrite or change. 8 years of silence finally ended. Yet the wounds left behind may take far longer to heal than anyone can imagine. Brad Pitt has spoken. The legal battles are nearing their end. But the distance within his family remains a question only time can answer. What do you think? Can relationships this fractured, this broken, ever find a way forward? If you found this story meaningful, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell for more real emotional stories like this one. Thank you for watching.